A note before this one begins. A number of you have asked whether these stories are collected into a single volume. A keepsake, the kind of thing you can put on a shelf and come back to when the house gets quiet. They are. The collection is in the description below the player. If the room you're sitting in tonight could use a book you can leave open on a table and read by lamplight, it's there. There are wells in the hollers of these mountains that, come sundown, do not match the depth they showed you in the day. The rope that held true at noon will lie about itself after dusk. And the people who knew them best, the old men who could tell you to the inch how deep a well ran before they took their boots off the bucket, they stopped drawing from them entirely in 1877. They just kept what they had in cisterns. They just kept the rain barrels full. Before we go on, tell me where you're listening from. I read every one of them, and it always surprises me how far this voice carries. A letterbox at the bottom of a holler, an apartment 3 stories above a paved road, a porch in a town the holler has been filled in for a generation. Wherever you are, leave a line below. I'll be reading along. This is one I came across in a hand-printed ledger in the back of a courthouse, the kind of book that wasn't meant to be read by anyone but the clerk who owned his own desk. The writing on the page wasn't a story. It was a tally, names beside dates. Beside every name, a measurement of how far a man had to walk to fetch clean water. 4 of those names, 4 ledger rows, are the bones of what I'm about to tell you. The year this begins is 1877. The month is September. The place is Black Cane Holler, a cove cut so deep into the Cumberland side of Breathitt County, Kentucky, that for 160 days a year the sun touches it for no more than 3 hours at high noon. To get to it from any main road you had to come down a trace that wagon men had cut in the 1850s and not much improved on since. The trace ended at a stake fence. Beyond the stake fence was the hamlet. 8 houses, 4 of them settled enough to be called farms, the rest nothing but pole shacks for hog-killing weather. The man at the heart of what I'm about to tell you is named Abel Stroud. He was 34 and a half when the year opened, dark-haired, sharp in the shoulders but thin in the arms, with a missing bite out of the top of his left ear, he'd taken from a horsefly swatter at the age of 9 and that never healed quite flat. His eyes were gray under both lights. His hat was a wide-brimmed slouch of muslin-dyed wool. His trousers were homemade jean fustian and patched twice at the right knee. When he thought, he caved his chin down against his chest. When he listened, he raised the knuckles of his right hand to his mouth. He was a man who liked arithmetic and disliked most other arguments. He had a sister, Hettie Stroud Younce, age 32, small-boned, brown-haired to her shoulders until a fever in 74 had it cut short at the jaw, a freckle cluster at her left cheekbone, 3 freckles in a triangle you could cover with a thumb. She had been widowed in 75 when her husband Sol Younce fell from a chestnut he was trimming and broke his neck 2 days before the hay was fit to come off the field. She had stayed on. She had a son, Levy, age 6. She was tired in the way that the word tired doesn't sound quite right for. She was frightened that she'd lose the place if the next tax note came and the next one came on the heels of that, because she'd been holding the mortgage in her name since Sol's death with money she'd borrowed against her father's dower and was due to be paid off in 3 years between now and the time the slate ran out. She needed to leave, and she needed to leave before the second tax note. She'd chosen Iowa because a cousin who'd gone west in 69 was still writing letters that sounded like he'd found work and not just prairie. The bond between Abel and Hettie was the kind of bond that doesn't need naming because it's there in every handshake. He had followed her out of their parents' house 7 years after her. He was her nearest living relation by 2 days' ride. He'd loaned her the $4 it had cost to put the notice in the Breathitt newspaper. He'd be on the horse on Tuesday the 18th of September and he would not come back to the holler for anything but eating and picking up the lantern, because the trip to the trailhead at the top of the cove was 2 hours up an animal path and he had to make it twice with the cart to get her out. His horse's name was Carpenter. Carpenter was a 5-year-old bay with 1 white sock on the off-hind and a habit of laying his ears back when put to a load he didn't understand, which happened twice on that ride. He came up out of the holler on the second trip. He unhitched at the stake fence. He picked up the lantern. He said something about Levy needing to eat. That was the last clean thing that happened for a while. He made his first plum on the 1st of September, when the sun had crossed the lip of the cove and was standing hard on the place where he was working. He'd taken the original deed in his satchel, Margaret Stroud's title, dated 1803, Cuttler's survey chain of 1847. The well's recorded depth in both documents, 38 feet to the spring. Cuttler had marked it himself in iron rust pencil. Abel had built a small wooden spool the previous winter for exactly this purpose. 3 pounds of dressed limestone, bored through with a flax cord, the kind of cord used for bell ropes in Cumberland churches, dressed and waxed to dampen any elasticity. He tied a clove at every yard, all the way down to 38. He tied a clove at the bottom as a foul mark, a knot to tell him that the spool had hit. He lowered the plumb. He read the cord against the clove. The spool was 6 feet shy of the stone lip when the cord had finished its length. 38. He wrote it down in his pocketbook. He wrote the date. He wrote the hour. He wrote the number. He underlined the number twice. He tested it again at 4 in the afternoon, when the sun had gone behind the eastern wall of the cove and the muzzle of the well was in its own shadow. He'd expected the reed to drift, the way a plum drifts in a breath of wind across a funnel of cold air. He'd expected half an inch. He had not expected to recompute. He recomputed. The spool was 6 feet shy of the lip. He read the clove. He read the bottom clove. 38. He packed the spool in the leather. He walked back to his cabin. He ate oatcakes. He thought of the cousins in Iowa. He slept well. He thought he'd settled the count. He'd not. 4 days later, on the 5th of September, he went down with Hettie to draw water for the move-out. He drew up a bucket. He let it back. He counted the pulls aloud. He was a man who counted pulls. 6 pulls. He let the bucket back with one steady straight-arm motion to avoid chop. He drew it up again. He counted. 6 pulls. Hettie, returning from the outhouse, told him she had drawn from the Stroud well 10 years before she'd moved up the trace to her own cabin, and she'd counted 8 pulls even then. She had been counting pulls since she was 9. They didn't put it down to anything. They put it down to memory. That evening, at sundown, when the light had gone copper, Hettie drew up a bucket for Levy's bath. She drew up the bucket. She counted. She came back to the cabin and said, with the voice a person uses when they are reporting something to a man who will check it, "It was 7 pulls tonight, Abel." Abel checked it at 1:30 sundown. He did not rig the plumb. He counted pulls. He let the bucket fall. He drew it up. He let it fall. He drew it up. He wrote, September 5th, sundown 7 pulls. He taught the boy that night. He taught the boy a rhyme. 6 pulls by day. 6 pulls by night. He did not believe the rhyme. He was teaching the boy a rhyme to put the boy's mind at ease. He went to the well at midnight. He counted pulls. 9 pulls. By September 7th, the dusk pulls had climbed to 8. By September 8th, the day before Garret would see him on the porch step, the dusk pulls climbed to 9. By the noon of September 9th, with the sun standing hard on the lip of the cove, the daily count still held at 6 and the plumb still read 38. He could not square the two. He tried. He sat inside with the deed in his hand and read Cuttler's number again. Cuttler had measured the well 3 times, in summer, in late autumn, in midwinter. He'd measured at the noon hour. He had not measured at the dusk. Cuttler had not measured at the dusk in 47. Cuttler had not measured at the dusk in 63, when the second survey had been done. Cuttler had not measured at the dusk in 80, when the third had been done. The county had measured on the noon. The county had only ever measured on the noon. The tradition, what the farm boys of Breathitt County passed from one to the next, the way they passed the location of the bee tree and the right way to rig a centerpole snare, was a daylight tradition. It was a noon tradition. It was a tradition of what could be written down. By September 11th, the dusk count had climbed to 10. Abel was out of patience with his own arithmetic. He set the plumb at the noon. 38. He set the plumb again, this time double-checking the spool against a fresh cord, and walking around the lip and reading north, south, east, west. 38, 38, 38, 38. He set the plumb at the dusk. The spool went down. He read the clove. 22, 16 feet shy, the exact number he had heard Garret speak of, in a tale he'd thought was Garret's old fellow nonsense. Garret had said 16 feet shy was the depth. Garret had said 16 feet shy was the depth the well gave at the dusk, every year, in his 46 years of drawing from the well. The number held. He thought about the rope. He thought about how a rope shortens under a load if the cord has been wet and dried and wet and dried. He thought about how a hemp strop shortens in the rain. He thought about how flax cord on a bell rope can shrink by an inch in 3 seasons. He thought about how a 38-foot rope can become a 36-foot rope by the simple physics of rope. He thought it through. He thought it through twice. He did not believe it. He could not square the simple rope shrink with a 22-foot reading on the spool numbers. 22 was not 38. 22 was not 36. 22 was 16 feet shy of 38. 22 was the number he'd heard in his bones. 22 was the number Garret had felt in his rope for 46 years. He sat with his pocketbook on the lip of the well. He did not write the number. He thought about writing it. He thought about writing it. He did not write it. The next day he would put the number in his pocketbook. He would not be able to put it out of his mind. On September 9th, with the day's count held fast at 6 and the noon count held fast at 38, he set the plumb again at 3/4 past midnight. The cord had been dressed with a fresh coat of beeswax that afternoon, the way Cuttler's own field books had directed. The beeswax was dry. The cord was dry. The cord was not wet. The cord had not been wet for 36 hours. He went down to the well with the spool and a lantern he'd been told to keep dimmed. The spool went down. The cord came taut. He read the clove. He read the bottom clove. 22. The spool was 16 feet shy of the lip. The cord had the same elasticity it had at noon. The cord had the same weight at the dusk. The cord did not lie. The cord was a cord. The cord would not lie to a man who had dressed it. He held the lantern. He let the spool down again. The cord went taut against the clove at 22. He let it go slack. He let it down again. The spool fell through the same length of cord. The cord resisted nothing. The cord was plain rope. He pulled the spool up. He measured the cord against a fresh measuring stave he'd cut that afternoon. The cord measured 38 feet. The cord measured 38 feet. The cord was 38 feet from clove to clove. The cord was exactly 38 feet. He let the cord down again. The spool went down at 3/4 past midnight. The cord went taut at 22. The cord had lied. The cord had lied, and the cord had measured 38 feet against a fresh measuring stave. He sat on the lip of the well with the lantern between his feet for the length of a hymn. He did not speak. He did not write the number. The number was 22. The number was 16 feet shy. The number had been 16 feet shy at the midnight of September 5th. The number had been 16 feet shy at the midnight of September 9th. The number was the number. He knew the number. By September 12th he had plumbed the well 5 more times. He had plumbed it at sundown. He had plumbed it at the first hour after sundown. He had plumbed it at the second hour after sundown. He had plumbed it at 4 in the morning. He had plumbed it at noon. The noon had returned 38 every time. The dusk had returned 22 every time. The first hour after sundown had returned 22 every time. The second hour had returned 22 every time. The fourth hour of the morning had returned 38 every time. He had written the times. He had written the numbers. He had kept the plumb away from the 7th hour of the morning and from the 7th hour of the evening because he'd started to feel that he'd gone too far in the measuring. On September 13th, when he'd come back to his cabin from the noon measure, he sat at his table and read his pocketbook twice. He had a column for the date and a column for the hour and a column for the depth. The column for the noon was uniform. The column for the noon read 38. The column for the dusk was uniform. The column for the dusk read 22. The column for the 4th hour of the morning read 38. The column for the 7th hour read nothing. He left the 7th hour empty. He didn't measure at the 7th hour. He didn't want to. He thought about the Vire's cousins. He thought about the Haleys. He thought about Bishop and Clem. He thought about what would happen to them on the 14th of September. He thought about whether Garret had told them. He thought about whether Garret had been able to. He wrote on the bottom of the page of September 13th, that he would ride up to Garret at dawnlight on the 14th, and ask to be told plainly what Garret had been told by the older folks in the cove when Garret had taken his first draw from the well as a boy. He wrote that the well was in the mouth of the lip of the year the same. He wrote that the well was at the noon of the year the same. He wrote that the well was at the dusk of the year 16 feet shy. He wrote that the well was, by the breath of his own hand, 16 feet shy. He underlined 16 feet shy 3 times. He drew a circle around the 3 underlines. He closed the pocketbook. He sat with his hat on his knees. By September 14th, the morning the Vires cousins were due to draw, the count at midnight had climbed to 10. The count at the dusk held at 10. The noon count held at 6. The plum at the noon held at 38. The plum at the dusk held at 22. The number 16 feet shy had not changed. The depth at the dusk had not changed. The rope on his own hand had not changed. The well knew the count. The well had always known the count. The well had known it for 46 years. The well had known it since Garret had taken his first draw as a boy. He packed the plum into the satchel. He would take it up onto the porch step of Garret's pole shack, and he would not let Garret go another day without knowing that the plum agreed with what the rope had always said. He went up to Garret at the start of September 8th, with the plum in his satchel and the pocketbook in his hand. Garret Mullins, age 74, thin-spoken, stooped in the shoulder by the time he was 50, gray-haired to the band of his hat, white-haired below. He had a scar at the bridge of his nose from a fro tool that had glanced there when he was 11. He walked with a hickory stick that had been his wife's father's, barked smooth and varnished from 3 generations of hands. He lived in a pole shack at the eastern wall of the cove, 270 yards from the Stroud well by his own survey, and he had lived there since 1831. He had drawn from the Stroud well for 46 years without remark. He knew the depth of the Stroud well the way a man knows the depth of his own wife's eyes. He was sitting on the porch step, mending a corn sheller with a length of wax thread. He did not look up when Abel came. "You've been troubled, Abel," Garret said. "I've been troubled, Garret. You've been down to the well again. Twice today. You've measured at the noon and at the dusk." "Yes." "What's the number this evening?" "I haven't measured yet." "You will. The dusk will be shy. 16 feet shy. 16 feet shy is the depth the well gives at the dusk. 16 feet shy is what the depth gives every dusk. 16 feet shy has been what the depth has given for 46 years, since the year before your sister was born." Abel said, "Garret, the well was 38 feet yesterday. The well is 38 feet today, at the noon. The deed says 38 feet. Cuttler's survey says 38 feet. The second survey says 38 feet. The tradition says 38 feet. Garret did not look up. The tradition says 38 feet because the tradition has only ever measured the 38. The tradition does not say 16 feet shy. The tradition does not pass that down. The tradition doesn't pass that down because that number has never been written in any ledger. That number has never been written in any ledger because no man alive has put a plum to the well at the dusk. No man alive has had any reason to. No man alive has seen 6 pulls by day become 9 pulls by dusk. No man alive has sat on the lip of this well at 3/4 past midnight and felt the rope pulling short in his own hand. You felt it, Garret. I felt it. I felt 16 feet shy for 46 years. I felt it in the rope. I felt it in the breath. I felt 16 feet shy in the way a man feels a hand laid on the back of his neck. 16 feet shy is the carrying number, Abel. 16 feet shy is what you carry out of this cove. 16 feet shy is the depth the well reads when the well wants to be left alone. Garret, what happens when the well wants to be left alone and you don't leave? You go a little funny in the head. You go a little funny in the head in the way a man goes funny when he measures something he shouldn't have measured. You go a little funny in the head for half a year or a year, and then you leave. Or you don't. Do the Vires cousins leave? They leave when I tell them. The Vires cousins leave because I tell them. They leave the same September of 77. They leave a Tuesday late afternoon with what they have on the wagon. They leave and they don't look back. They don't look back because I've told them not to. The well doesn't want to be looked at by a man who's just left. The well doesn't want a man who's just left to count its rope again. The well is impatient with a man who's just left. Garret, why didn't the county measure at the dusk? Because there's no reason to measure at the dusk, son. The county's business is the noon. The county's business has always been the noon. The noon is what you write. The dusk is what you feel. The dusk has never been what you write. Abel said, Garret, the well measured 9 pulls at midnight on September 5th. The well measured 6 pulls by day. 16 feet shy. 6 pulls by day, 9 pulls by midnight. 16. 16 is what you measure. 16 feet shy is the depth the well reads when it's pulling a man out. 16 feet shy is the depth a man feels in his own hand when he's about to leave a place he shouldn't have stayed in too long. Abel said, Garret, the Vire's cousins are coming on the 14th. They'll come on the 14th, Garret said without looking up. They'll come on the 14th, and they will draw from the well the way they have always drawn from the well, and the well will read itself 16 feet shy for them. They will feel it. They will feel it in the rope. They will leave without me telling them. They will leave because the rope told them. That quickly. A man knows. A man knows when a rope pulls short in his own hand. A man knows this without having to be told. A man knows this the way a man knows the way home. Let's go back to the story, Abel said. Have you ever drawn up a bucket and known, in your own hand, that the rope had lied to you? Have you ever counted pulls and known the count was wrong? Have you ever trusted a number and then felt, in your own wrist, that the number was off? You have. You have measured something in your life that didn't square with the paperwork. That's where we are. A note before we go any further. A few of you have written in to wonder if these stories have been collected somewhere you can keep. They have. There's a printed volume in the description below, the kind of thing you can leave open on a table by the lamp. If the room you're sitting in could use the company of a book, the link is right under the player. While you're there, tell me where you're listening from. Tell me what county you're in. Tell me the name of the road you're on. I'll be reading along. He went back down to the cabin. He ate cold oatcakes for dinner. He packed 3 trunks and a crate. He rigged the wagon. He rigged it twice. He took it apart. He put it back together. He packed again. He thought about driving the wagon up the trace at 2 in the morning of September 15th, when the moon was down and there would be no one in the cove to look at him with the eyes on the back of a playing card. He'd planned the leaving for sunrise of September 18th. He'd planned to drive in daylight, when the trace was firm and the horse knew the way he'd gone up. He'd planned to take Hettie and Levy in the dawnlight of September 18th and to put Hettie's 3 trunks and Levy's box of wooden animals into the wagon and to lead Carpenter up the animal path at a walk, with the boy on the seat and the horse tickler in his hand. He'd planned to pack a lunch of cornbread and a half-pound of jerked meat for each of them and to share the lunch on the saddlestone at the head of the trace. The plan had been careful. The plan had been a sound, careful plan. On September 15th, at 6:30 dawn, Bess the brindle hound began to bark. She was not giving the alert bark of a strange sight. She was giving the tight, thin bark of an animal that has been cornered in a familiar place. She was under the bed. She was under the kitchen table. She would not come outside. The barn cat was on the kitchen stoop. The cat had been a mouser in the cove for 5 years. The cat had not been at the door of the main cabin in winter, when the snow was deepest. The cat was rigid on the kitchen stoop. The cat's ears were laid flat. The cat's eyes were saucered open. The cat did not run. Abel went outside. The plumb-bob he'd left on the lip of the well was sitting where he'd left it, cord wound 3 times around the eastern stone of the lip. The plumb-bob was sitting still, exactly as he'd left it. The spool was not the slightest bit out of place. The lip of the well had gone. The dressed limestone that the original Stroud digging crew had dressed and set in 1803 was level with the ground. The cord of the plumb ran flat across the well's mouth and then into the ground at the eastern edge, as though the well had been filled and grown over and the ground had made itself seamless. He stood still. He didn't understand what he was seeing. He understood the measurement of the well. He had spent 10 days on the measurement. He did not understand what he was seeing of the ground. He walked out past the stake fence. Bess the brindle hound would not come out from under the bed. The cat did not run. The barn owl that had nested in the ridge beam of the milk house for 15 years, the barn owl that Abel had trained himself to hear every dawn dark of his life, was silent. It was 3/4 past dawn. He'd meant to take Hettie and the boy out at high noon of September 18th. He went inside. He took Hettie's arm from where she was sitting on the floor with Levy. "Hettie, today. Right now. Abel, today." He rigged the wagon in 40 minutes. He loaded the trunks. He loaded the box of wooden animals. He tied the canvas over the load. He pulled the tar off the horse. He put Levy on the seat with the horse tickler in his hand. He put Hettie on the seat beside him. He led Carpenter to the stake fence at the top of the trace, walking, because the trace had been wet that week and he did not want the wagon's wheels to bog down on the first bend. He looked back down the holler once. He did not look back when they came to the first bend. He did not look back when they came to the second. He did not look back when they crossed the head of the trace and the wheels of the wagon bumped against the ridge of the county road. Carpenter laid his ears back. Hettie held Levy's hand. Levy's hand was on the horse tickler and the horse tickler was across his knees. By the time the sun was full on the road, they were 3 miles into the trace and Abel had not yet explained to Hettie why they were leaving 3 days earlier than he had told her they would. He explained at the Saddlestone, at the head of the trace, where he'd planned to share a lunch of cornbread. He did not have the lunch out. He had the cornbread tied in cloth. He sat on the stone with the boy on his knee. He said, "Hettie, the well is shorter at night." She said, "Shorter how, Abel?" 16 feet shorter. Hettie. 16 feet shorter at the dusk. 16 feet shorter at the night. 16 feet shorter where the rope says 38? Exactly so. Abel, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Don't measure it at night. I did measure it at night. Then don't measure it again. I won't measure it again. They sat at the Saddlestone for a quarter hour. They did not eat the cornbread. They did not eat the jerked meat. They turned the wagon west on the county road and they drove on. The boy was quiet. The horse knew the road. The road was firm. By the time the September light had reached the second hill, they were out of Breathitt County. September 18th, the day they had been scheduled to leave, they were at the cousin's house in Iowa, 3 counties west of Breathitt. Hettie had a spare room. Levy had a straw-tick mattress on the floor. Abel sat at the cousin's kitchen table and drank chicory coffee and said very little. On September 20th, he rode back into Breathitt County. He did not ride back into the holler. He rode to the courthouse. He walked into the clerk's office, the small cattle shed of a building behind the courthouse proper, with its plain board counter, its pressboard shelves, the smell of dust and lamp oil. He laid the Stroud deed on the counter. He laid his pocketbook on the counter. He said to the clerk, "Burr Trent, I want to look at the survey of this well." Burr Trent was the clerk. He was 48, pink-skinned, bald, with a habit of cutting his own bangs at lamplight and an undertaker's taste in vests. He'd been the clerk of Breathitt County since 1861, his father having been the clerk before him, his wife being the daughter of a clerk from Owsley County. He knew the records the way a man knows the raises in his own floor. He said, "Which well?" "Stroud well. Black Cane Holler." He hauled a brace of freestanding shelves out from the wall. He lifted the Cuttler survey ledger of 1847. He opened it to the page of the Stroud well. He turned it toward Abel so Abel could read it. Abel read it. He read it again. He read the depth. He read the date. He read the 3-day count. 38 feet to the spring on the 21st of June, 1847. Tested on the 10th of August. Tested on the 4th of December. 3 counts, 38 feet, on the noon hour of every count. He pointed at the depth. He pointed at the phrase in Cuttler's hand, and the depth holds at all hours of day. He pointed at the date stamps. He pointed at the noon times. He said to the clerk, "Burr Trent, has the county ever measured this well at the dusk?" "No." "Abel, has the county ever measured this well at the night?" "No." "Is there a tradition in this county of measuring wells at the dusk or at the night?" "There is not." "Abel, there's no such tradition. There's no instruction in any field book I've read. There's no entry at the noon of a day that's not noon. There's no count at any other hour. The county has measured on the noon only. The county has measured on the noon only. And would you expect, if the dusk count had held at 38 from the time of the well's original digging to the present, that the dusk count would appear in the ledgers? You'd expect a tradition. You'd expect every farm boy in the county to know to count the well at the dusk the way he counts it at the noon. You'd expect the dusk count to be the same as the noon count, and so to belong in the ledgers, and so to have come down to us. You'd not expect the ledgers to be silent on the matter. And you'd expect the surveyors to have measured at the dusk if the dusk count held. You'd expect. But the ledgers are silent. The ledgers are silent. And the tradition is silent. The tradition is silent. Then the dusk count has been different and the ledgers do not show it, and the tradition does not pass it on and there's no record. Just so, Abel. Just so. Abel folded the deed gently. He put it in the satchel. He thanked the clerk. He walked out. At the door he stopped. Burr Trent. Yes, Abel? What does the night count read? By tradition. The night count reads what the rope says. Abel. The night count reads what a man feels in the rope when he counts at the dusk. I've never pulled a rope at the dusk of the Stroud well. I've never pulled a rope at the dusk of any well in Black Cane. I've never pulled a rope at the dusk of any well in Breathitt County. And what does the rope say by tradition? The rope says a number, Abel. The rope says a number that nobody has written down. The rope says what is felt. What is felt? Burr Trent. 16 feet shy, Abel. 16 feet shy is what is felt. 16 feet shy is the carrying number. 16 feet shy is what a man carries out of the holler when he leaves. 16 feet shy is the depth the well reads when the well wants to be left alone. 16 feet shy has been what a man has felt since 1831 and no one has set it down in a ledger. 16 feet shy has been what a man has felt since the first Stroud dug the well and no one has come along to argue with the number. The number is what the number is. The number is what is felt. Burr Trent. Yes, Abel? I am carrying 16 feet shy out of the holler. I am carrying it on me. I am carrying it in the rope. I am carrying it in the breath. I am carrying it to Iowa. Yes, Abel. I will not measure another well at any hour other than noon. Yes, Abel. You will not. He went back to the cousin's house. He sat down in the spare room with Hettie and Levy. He set his hat crown up on the corner of the chair, and he smoothed the hair on the back of his skull with the heel of his hand. He said, Hettie, we did the right thing. They'll be cross in the holler. Abel. They'll be more than cross. They'll be quiet. The well measured 38 feet at night. Hettie. The well measured 38 feet at night by county records and by tradition. We measured 22 at the dusk on September 11th. We measured the seal at dawn on September 15th. The county's ledgers don't show it. The surveyors don't count at night. The people who teach new farm boys don't teach it. They teach them to count in the daylight. They don't teach the depth at night because there is no depth at night. Abel, where is Garret? Garret stayed on, Hettie. Garret's still in the cove. Garret. Garret knew. Garret knew. Abel did not look back down the holler. Abel did not write another line in his pocketbook after September 20th, 1877. The pocketbook sat inside the satchel. The satchel sat at the foot of the bed. Hettie did not ask to see it. Levy did not ask. The next year, 1878, Abel came back to the holler once on a Sunday in November. He came up the trace at high noon. He did not go down to the well. He did not walk past the stake fence. He went up to Garret Mullins's pole shack and sat on the porch step with Garret for the length of a church service. Garret was 81 by then, and thinner in the shoulder, and whiter below the hatband. They did not speak much. Abel said, Garret, the well measured 38 in the ledgers. The ledgers said 38. Garret said, the ledgers didn't say what I told you. The ledgers said 38. They said 38 by day. They said 38 on the noon of the days they measured. They never measured at the dusk. They never measured at the night. There's no such measurement. There's been no such measurement in this county's ledgers since we've kept ledgers. The depth at night has never been written down by anyone. It's been felt by everybody. The depth at night has been felt by everybody, and it's been passed on by hand and by pressure and by what an old man on a porch step says to his friend's boy. What have you been feeling, Garret? I've been feeling the rope get short. I've been feeling the spool slip against the clove. I've been feeling 16 feet shy. I've been feeling 16 feet shy for 46 years. I've been feeling it for 46 years, and I never tested for it. I never tested because there was no need. I knew, Garret. There's no record of it at the courthouse. There's no record of it. They've known in the ledgers. They've known by tradition. They've never written it down. They've passed it on by hand and by pressure. The county surveyed once every 20 years. The county never surveyed at night. There was no point. There would have been no point. Abel said, Garret, you're a good boy, Abel. You're a careful boy. You measured. You wrote. You made a tally. You followed the right path. Nobody follows the right path. I never counted pulls. I never plumbed. I just sat with the lip. What did you feel, Garret? 16 feet shy feels like a hand laid on the back of the neck. 16 feet shy feels like a small, cool room. 16 feet shy is the carrying number. Abel. By the year 1880 had rolled to December, Garret Mullins was no longer in the pole shack at the eastern wall of the cove. Garret had died in November of '78. He died in a daughter-in-law's house in Perry County, 4 counties east of Breathitt. He had not died in the cove. He'd made his daughter promise him. His daughter had promised. His body was brought back for burial. The burial was at the upper churchyard. The burial was in November. The well was not measured at the burial. The burial was not at the well. The burial was at a distance. They carried him up the trace. They came back. They did not measure. By the year 1897, the pole shack at the eastern wall of the cove had fallen in on its own weight. The Stroud cabin had been sold to a family named Little who had moved in from Rowan County. They did not draw from the well. They drew from a cistern they had built the first year. They had a horse and a cow and 3 children, and they were not a family of measurers. They let the wild grass grow over the lip of the well. They never measured the lip. They never walked to the lip. They never looked down when they walked near it. By the year 1905, the Little family had gone back to Rowan County. They had not sold the cabin. They had not given it back. They had left it to the woods, and the woods had eaten it. By the year 1940, the well had been overgrown. By 1945, a road had been cut for oil rig service, and it crossed the upper part of the trace. By 1980, the road had been paved. By 2018, the paving had been chipped. By 2022, the ground at the lip of the well had been turned by a backhoe for a different reason that did not involve the well, and the backhoe operator said on his blog that the ground had been lace thin over the well, and the well had been 3 feet deep with the water table only a foot below and no spring at all. No spring at all. A springless well. By the year 2023, the plumb-bob had been carried away. By the year 2024, the winding cord of the plumb was gone. By the year 2026, the paving of the chip road had cracked and a piece of paved asphalt had been kicked up by a root, and it was in the ditch along the trace. The bit of paving had the date 2024 on it in white paint. By November of 2026, the paving had been carried back. There's a man in Breathitt County, a man I'd call Garret's great-grandson. A man in his 70s who was born of Garret's line by his daughter's marriage into the Vires family, who keeps a tally. The tally is private. The tally has been private since the 1870s. It's a handwritten list of dates and measurements, kept in a cigar box in the bottom drawer of his dresser. The measurements on the list do not vary. They read the same every time. 16 feet shy by night, 16 feet shy by dusk, 16 feet shy by rope, 16 feet shy by breath. The man does not draw from a well in Breathitt County. The man does not look down. By the year 1923, the lip of the Stroud well had been taken in by a woodlet and the woodlet had been logged. The loggers had been a husband and a son named Cumberland from Perry County. They had not gone to the well. They had cut what was there to cut, and they had been paid by the boardfoot, and they had not measured the well. The Cumberland family did not know the well. The Cumberland family had moved back to Perry County by the year 1925. By 1931, the bit of paved road along the trace had cracked. The bit of paving had been replaced by a gravel-surfaced county road, with a drainage ditch of 3 spiked stone. The drainage ditch had been cut by an unemployed mason named Tilden Bird, who had built his name into the ditches of Breathitt County by the year 1935. In the spring of 1968, the Vires family, a line continued from the cousins who had left on the 11th of September of 1877, had a reunion at the upper churchyard. The reunion was well attended. The Vires cousins had come west and they had not come back. Their grandchildren in 68 had not come back. Their great-grandchildren had not come back. The reunion was a one-day affair. There was a Sunday meal. There was no plumb-bob laid to the well. There was no measurement. The meeting lasted from noon to dark. No one from the reunion went down to the well after dark. They had not walked near the well after the dusk of September 11th, 1877. They had stayed at the upper churchyard. They had stayed at a distance. Their son, the man in his 70s who keeps the tally today, was at that reunion in 68 when he was 15. He had been told at the reunion by his mother in private on the upper churchyard porch step that the well in Black Cane Holler was 16 feet shy by night. He had been told to carry the number. He had been told not to write it down except in the private tally his mother's father had kept. He had been told to keep the tally in a cigar box in the bottom drawer of a dresser. He had been told to keep the tally private. He had been told to carry 16 feet shy for the rest of his life. He had carried it. He had carried it for 58 years. He had kept the tally. He had kept the tally going. He had added a date and a measurement every year on a Sunday in November. He had not missed a year. He had not missed a measurement. He had added, every year, an entry that read simply 16. 16 was the number that was kept. 16 was the number that he had carried out of the holler. I want you to sit with that for a moment. How does a number survive in a man's life? How does a number travel across 6 generations? Kept in a cigar box in a bottom drawer, passed from hand to hand on a Sunday in November, never written down except in this private tally. How does a man carry a number for 58 years and not be told a single time what the number means? How does the county never write the number down? How does the surveyor never measure at the dusk? That's where this rests. That's where this has rested for 149 years. The number rests. The man rests. The well rests. The tote road along the upper trace has since been paved and chipped and paved again. A small section of paving has been kicked up in 2023 by the root of a beech tree whose seed had been planted by a wind-borne acorn from the eastern ridge in 1986. The paving has the date 2024 in white paint. The paving has been carried back in 2026 by the man who keeps the tally in the boot of a truck that did not go down to the well. The man does not go down to the well. The man has been on the tote road 4 times in his life. The man has never looked down the well. The man has never taken the plumb-bob out of his satchel in Breathitt County. The man is 73 years old this year. The ceremony this man keeps, the small quiet gesture he has kept for the last 40 years of his life, the private word he keeps for the tally, is this. Every night of his life, just before he sleeps, he draws a slow breath in through his nose. He holds the breath for the count of 16. He breathes the breath back out. He does not make a sound. He does not move his mouth. He keeps the breath at 16. He keeps it at 16 the way Garret would have kept it. He keeps it at 16 the way the rope keeps it at the dusk. He does this every night. He is 73 years old this year. He does not measure a well. He does not look down a well. He does not walk past a well without feeling 16 feet shy. He has been feeling 16 feet shy for 40 years. He is not the only one to feel it. I have felt it. You have too. You have felt it if you have ever drawn a bucket and counted the pulls and known the count was wrong. You have felt it if you have ever pulled a rope down a well and known in your own hand that the rope had lied to you. You have touched this place. You have touched Black Cane Holler. If you have ever measured a number and felt in your own body that the number was shy, if you've ever trusted a tally and felt the tally to be wrong, leave a line below. Tell me the number. Tell me the place. I'll be reading along. The next story I will tell you, I will be telling you soon, will be a different place, a different impossibility. It will be a church bell that rang of its own accord in a town whose steeple had been taken down the season before. The bell had not been rung by any living hand. The bell had been rung by a rope that no man had laid to the clapper. The number of times the bell rang has been counted by two women who kept a hotel lobby in a town that does not now exist. They counted the strikes. They counted 10. They counted 10 in spite of the fact that the bell had not been rung by any living hand in that town. They counted 10 in spite of the fact that the rope had been taken off the clapper in the year before. They counted 10. They counted 10. That's a different number. That's a different story. That's a different hand measurement that didn't square with the records. But tonight, the number is 16 feet shy. Mind the rope at sundown. The ledger at the courthouse will say 38 feet.
Me cap fergaten tales.